Hey there, ladies and gents. Today is part one of our Puppy Place Goldie read along. Chapter 1. Charles woke up with a bad feeling in his stomach. Why? For a minute he figured it out. For a minute he couldn't figure it out. Then he rolled over and looked at his clock. It was 3:46 a.m. Charles could hear the loud deedle-dee of his dad's pager going off. Mr. Peterson was a fireman, and when his pager went off, there was a fire somewhere in town. Charles listened to his dad's footsteps going downstairs. He did hear the slam of a truck door and an engine starting up. He lay there for a while, worrying a little. He decided to stay awake until his dad came home. But he must have fallen asleep because when he woke up again, the sun was shining. And his clock said it was 7:16. Charles rubbed his eyes and climbed out of bed. He then raced down to the kitchen and looked out the window. Dad's red pickup was not in the way, but Mom was making French toast with a bean. Charles' little brother crawled around the floor by her feet. The smell of cinnamon made Charles' mouth water. "Is Dad?" Charles began. "Dad's fine," Mom said. "He called a little while ago. There was a big fire, but everyone is okay. He'll be home." Charles went out a big breath. It was cool to have a fireman dad, but sometimes scary too. "He'll be home soon," Mom told Charles. "Where's the fire?" asked Lizzie, scuffling her slippers as she shuffled into the kitchen. She rubbed her eyes and yawned. Lizzie was Charles' older sister. It always took her a long time to wake up. "Out in a farm in Middletown," Mom said. At this, Lizzie's eyes popped open. "Were any animals hurt?" she asked. Mom shook her head. "No, I don't think so." She flipped a slice of French toast. Set the table, okay?" Mom asked. That proved everything was okay. What could be more normal than doing chores? Since there was nothing to worry about, Charles decided to ask his favorite question, the one he asked every single morning. "So why can't we have a dog?" he asked. His mother sighed. "Again?" She pulled the orange juice out of the fridge and filled 4 glasses and the bean's purple sippy cup. "Do we have to talk about this every day?" "Only until we get a dog," Lizzie said with a sleepy smile. "First you said we couldn't have a dog because our apartment was too small," Charles reminded his mom. "Then we moved to this big old house. And now there is plenty of room." He followed Lizzie around the table, putting a fork onto every napkin she laid down. "But instead of adopting a dog, we adopted the bean." Charles looked down at the bean. Sometimes Charles could hardly remember the bean's real name. It was Adam. They called him the Bean since he had came to live with him when he was just a tiny squirmy baby. "Just a little bean," Mr. Peterson had said, and the name had been stuck. The bean grinned up at Charles and made a little wolfing noise. "Everyone thinks, even though he thinks he's a dog, he's not," Charles pointed out. "He's just a kid who likes to crawl around the floor, beg for food, and sleep on a fleece dog bed." "And carry his stuffed toys in his mouth," Lizzie added. "It's a phase," their mom said, by the way she always did. "He'll get over it by the time he's 17, Charles finished the way their dad always did. It was their dad's favorite joke. Their mom didn't think it was so funny. "Anyways," Charles continued, back when you said a baby and a dog were too much at once, all you had to say, we had to wait until the bean got older. Well, now he is. He's not a baby anymore." "No, he's not," agreed his mother a little sadly. She loved babies and kitties, but this not puppies. Mr. Peterson always joked about his wife being a cat person, not a dog person. Mrs. Peterson said she didn't see anything wrong with that. She had grown up with cats, and she was used to cats. But the other members of her family weren't interested in cats. The rest of the family loved dogs. So why can't we get a puppy? Lizzie and Charles asked together. Jinx, Charles said to Lizzie, you owe me a favor. You clear that table after we eat. Lizzie stuck out her tongue. Charles grinned. He always said Jinx first. We will have a puppy, their mother said, someday when the time is right and when the puppy was right. But when will that be? Charles asked. When I'm 17? He felt if he'd had to waited forever for a dog. It wasn't fair. Everyone else had dogs, and nobody wanted more in the world than Charles and Lizzie and the Bean. Nobody would take better care of a dog or teach it many great tricks or love it as much as they would. We'll know, Mom said, when the time is right. We'll know. From that tone in her voice, she had that tone in her voice, the tone that meant it was time to change the subject. But Lizzie didn't seem to notice. If we had a dog, we'd all feel better, she said. Did you know that dog owners are happier, healthier, and more relaxed than people who don't have dogs? Plus, having a dog teaches kids responsibilities. A dog can help protect the house and save people from fire. Mom held up both hands. Enough! She cried. I heard your facts before, Lizzie, and I know you're all true, but I also know puppies are a lot of work and cause lots of mess and trouble. She turned back to the skillet of the stove. Charles knew what she was thinking. Dogs shed fur all over the place. They chew things. They knock over garbage cans. They bark. There were lots of reasons for not getting a dog. Mom didn't even have to spell it out anymore, but this time Lizzie seemed to understand that the subject was closed. She slid into her seat and picked up the newspaper. Cool, Mom, she said. Your story about the school board meeting is on the front page. I bet Mr. Baker will ask me to write about this fire wherever it was, Mom said. Mr. Baker was the editor of Littleton News and Mrs. Peterson's boss. She wiped her hands on a towel. I'll give him a call as soon as your dad gets home. She looked at the clock. I'm surprised Dad's not home here already. I guess we better start breakfast without him. You two will be late for school. I hope he gets here before we have to go, said Charles. Mom piled 2 plates with French toast and brought them to the dinner table. She then cut up another piece and put it on the Bean's plate on the floor next to Charles' feet. Charles had noticed she had given up on trying to make the Bean sit in a high chair. Maple syrup? She asked, passing the bottle to Charles. Charles poured a big glug of syrup onto his toast. Then he remembered his new joke. Charles told a joke every morning. Hey, knock, knock, he said. Watch the syrup, said Mom. You're supposed to say who's there. He reminded her. He then looked down at his plate. Oops, the syrup had practically drowned all his French toast. Mom sighed and held out her hand for the bottle. Who's there? She asked. Interrupting cow, Charles said. Interrupting, Mom began, but before she could finish, Charles jumped in. Moo! He cracked up. Get it? He asked the interrupting cow. Charles had only taken one bite of his breakfast when he heard Dad's pickup pull into the driveway. A minute later, Dad trudged into the kitchen. His shoulders were slumped, his face was smudged with soot, and his hair was all flattened from being on his helmet. "Dad!" cried Lizzie, jumping up to hug him. "Hey, Pumpkin," he said tiredly. Charles noticed the big bulge underneath Dad's jacket. "What's that?" he asked, pointing. He did notice that the bulge was moving. Charles came closer and the bulge was squiggling and squirming all over the place. Dad smiled and pulled the zipper out of his coat down a few inches. "Meet Goldie," he said. Charles saw 2 chocolate brown eyes, a pair of floppy ears, a twitching black nose, and a furry golden face all streaked with soot. "A puppy!" Charles yelled.